Super. So hi, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday, June 11th meeting of the Joint Affordable Housing Group, hosted by the Martha's Vineyard Commission. Welcome to everybody. I'm Laura Silber. This is just for the recording for folks who don't know me. I'm Laura Silber. I'm the Island Housing Planner for the Martha's Vineyard Commission, serving the 6 towns and the 6 towns of Martha's Vineyard and the town of Boswell. And Lucy Morrison is my colleague who is running the Zoom and handling tech. So we're going to go around the Zoom room, and thanks to everybody for showing up. We've got quite a group here. I'm just going to call on you. For those who are just coming in, please introduce yourself, your name, your town, and what your position is in that town. Or if you're on an organization, the organization and what position you have. We'll try to go around quickly just so we can get started. I'm going to start with my visual top row, which is Peter Cook.
Hi, everybody. I'm Peter Cook. I'm on the Chilmark Planning Board, Site Review Housing Committee, and I'm also a board member of the Up Island Council on Aging, which is interested in all of this business as well.
Thanks, Peter. Julia Livingston next, please.
Hi, I'm on the Edgartown Planning Board.
And point person for the housing production plan, right?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks, Julia. Next, we'll go to Wanda at Town of West Tisbury.
Hi, Wanda Blake Higgins, West Tisbury Affordable Housing Committee and Trust.
Thank you. David Ignacio.
Hi, I'm on the Edgartown Planning Board.
Great. Ann Wallace.
Ann Wallace on the Chilmark Housing Committee and Planning Board, and with Peter, we're the point people for the HPP.
And Ann is also on the Dukes County Regional Housing Authority Board, correct?
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. Ann McDonough.
I'm Ann McDonough, Tisbury Affordable Housing with Victor and the Tisbury Planning Board.
Thank you and welcome. Marie Larson.
Hello, everybody. Chilmark Select Board.
Thank you. John Rao.
Hi, West Tisbury Planning Board.
Great. Victor Capocha.
Victor Capocha, I'm chair of the Affordable Housing Committee in Vineyard Haven, Tisbury. I'm on the CPC and the Housing Trust as well.
And point person, one of the point people for the Tisbury Housing Production Plan as well. Okay, Terry from IHT.
Hi, Terry Bernard, Director of Real Estate at Island Housing Trust.
Mike Bellissimo.
Afternoon, everyone. Mike Bellissimo. I am the Interim Executive Director for Harbor Homes.
Thank you. John Abrams.
Hi, everybody. I am on the steering committee of the Coalition to Create the Martha's Vineyard Housing Bank.
Thank you. Ben Robinson.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Ben Robinson, Tisbury Planning Board and MVC Commissioner.
Richard Toole.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm currently on the Climate and Energy Committee in Oak Bluffs, and as a former member of the Martha's Vineyard Commission, when I worked on housing we've been doing this, oh my gosh, for 40 years, and we don't seem to be making any progress, but I'm still interested, so do what I can.
Thanks, Richard. Elaine Miller.
Coalition to Create Martha's Vineyard Housing Bank and Tisbury Affordable Housing.
Thank you. Katie Donahue. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Katie Donahue, Oak Bluffs Affordable Housing.
And Shanette.
Jeanette Dillian, I'm the manager for the Edgartown Affordable Housing Committee and Trust, and also contact person for the HPP. One of the contact person.
Thank you. I should mention Katie's one of the contact people for the Oak Bluffs HPP as well. Bray Edelston, did I pronounce your first name correctly?
Yeah, you got it. My name's Bray. I am the Edgartown Planning Board Assistant.
Oh, fantastic. Nice to meet you.
You as well.
Cass Luskin.
Yeah, my name's Cass Luskin. I'm an associate member of the West Tisbury Planning Board.
Great. And finally, Michael Kim.
Michael Kim, Martha's Vineyard Commission. I'm a commissioner.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you, everybody. So with the way we do the JAG, it's not like a formal agenda. We have topics that allow us to you have a discussion and share information. So if we need to add something or divert off of this, then that's totally fine. The topics are like a structure so that we can keep the conversation organized. So the first topic for today, I just want to do a brief recap of Friday's meeting with the Placemate founders, Kai and Colin Froelich, who presented the Lease to Locals program. And I want to thank the town of Chilmark for organizing that meeting. They're about to start a pilot, a Lease to Locals pilot with Placemate, funded by their Affordable Housing Trust. And for those who didn't attend, this was a meeting on Friday with the Placemate founders. It was a hybrid meeting so that they could talk about the pilot with Chilmark and what the potential is for expanding a program out and offering it to the rest of the towns, potentially with shared administrative costs. They're doing this in Orleans and Wellfleet right now. Those towns are about to launch a shared pilot program, I believe either later this month or early next month. The town funds its own incentives in its own town, but the programs are identical, so the administrative costs are shared. So this is a way to, you know, do the same program regionally and bring your administrative costs down. So is there anybody who has, well, I'm looking here to see who was actually at that meeting. I know Anne was at the meeting. There were members from other towns who were there, but I'm not seeing, Joe Victor was at the meeting. Kim Angel was there from West Tisbury. Mark Leonard was there from Oak Bluffs. I think Aquina was the only town that wasn't represented. So basically, I'm wondering if, let me see. Victor, can you just give your takeaway for the town of Tisbury from hearing this? Like just a quick blip of what your takeaway was.
My takeaway is that the potential to do this on a collaborative basis is huge. The benefits are huger even. Oh, the benefits are great. It in some respects really makes sense to do this as an island-wide because that's what our market really is in terms of where they're aiming. We had a select board member and the new town administrator in Tisbury on the phone on the day before the Thursday meeting, getting with the founding couple. And so they heard about the program on a direct basis, and that's really important because they're key members of the trust. We've had two discussions in the Affordable Housing Committee about the potential to do this, but we really need to dig deeper about the model that we want to put together. But my bottom line is I hope we can continue talking on a collective basis because I think this makes sense, especially on a collective basis.
Super. Thanks, Victor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the link for Placemates Lease to Locals website in the chat. I think at this point, so my job is to like introduce the towns to all of these resources, but we talked about this in the meeting on Friday. At this point, the conversation really needs to happen within the towns and in between the towns as to whether or not you want to look at opting in to a shared program and moving something forward with Placemate. What I would really encourage the towns to do, and I did this at Friday's meeting, but a lot of folks weren't on there, is dig into the Lease to Locals website, look at the programs that are currently running in Provincetown and Nantucket, because they're incredibly successful. It's a small amount of outlay financially for a very quick return on rentable units that target the missing middle. And because this is not a state-funded program, it's funded with local town funds, you can be more specific about who you want to target and also require that whichever renters are part of this program, they can be, you may have a requirement that says they have to be employed, whether in the town or on the island, in order to qualify for these units. So it's a super effective way. It's targeted to resort towns. So they do this only in resort towns. The formula really works great. And the most important thing is it's fast. Like the conversion rate for units from short-term rentals or vacant units into long-term rentals through this program, which is what the Lease to Locals program does, is really effective and it's very quick. So it's a terrific interim measure to get people housed while you're working on increasing your own permanent inventory, which is how Provincetown is using this program. They have over 100 units in the pipeline right now. So their intent is to utilize this program for 3 years and then reevaluate and see what they need after they have these 100+ units on the ground and people actually in those units. We have a lot of units in the pipeline right now, but we don't have a lot of units like ready to go online. So we're going to have a gap here. The need is increasing and we don't have a lot of units ready to move into at this point. So I'd really encourage you guys to look at all that information. So I'm going to, let's see, here's the chat. Does anyone have any questions about lease to locals before we move on to the next topic? No? Lease to locals.
Let me just say,
Yeah.
In the Friday meeting, we did raise the question about, for those that were there, Jeanette was there, I think. And there was, Laura pointed out several other people. Allison from Chilmark pulled together that meeting. I've communicated back to her to ask how she thinks we can advance the conversation with among the towns. So I don't know if can we communicate to you or Lucy, Laura, to say there's interest, and then have Allison or I can try and pull people together?
So what I'm going to
How
say
do we
is,
want to do that?
so what I really think needs to happen is that from my experience with the towns, there needs to be a presentation from Placemate to your town so that your town boards can ask questions. Because in the absence of that, there's going to be a lot of speculation and concern and, well, how does this work? Blah, 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 blah. So that's not what Lucy and I do. So what I would really encourage the towns to do, the folks sitting on this call in your boards and committees, is reach out to Kai and Colin at Placemate directly in conjunction with all your relevant town boards. So if you're going to need the FinCom to approve this, if you're going to need the Affordable Housing Trust to approve this, like think about where's the money to pay for this going to come from. In Chilmark, it was the Molly Flender Fund, the Housing Trust, which already had funds in it that were flexible enough to use over 100% of AMI. Because again, remember, these are not capital A affordable funds. So you really can't use CPC funds for this. Generally, the range it targets is up to 120 or up to 150 AMI. You're not looking at 80% or below. I know that CPC can go up to 100, but it's a little bit on the edge of what this program serves. So before you start the conversation, figure out what you have. Figure out what you have in your housing trust. And the housing trust should all have spreadsheets where you can identify what you have in your trust, what the revenue stream is, and what, if any, restrictions are on those revenue streams. If your trust doesn't have that, that is the number one thing to do, is to make sure every single trust in all 6 towns knows that. Because it's impossible to advance forward on any project if you don't know what you have in your housing trust. So that's number one. John?
I just want to say that I think this is such a great program, and I would just strongly encourage the towns not to restrict it to people that live or work in the town, but rather the island. As Victor said, it's so important because that is the market.
Thanks, John.
That's partly why we need to collaborate.
Yeah.
But it's also it's a great cover for each town.
Right. So if you
island-wide.
start the conversation within the town so that the town is
it has
educated
to
as to
be.
how it works and know where your funding is going to come from, because the town still needs to fund it. So is it going to come from your general fund? Does that mean that, is it going to come from your housing trust? Either way, does the FinCom have to approve it? And then contact Placemate, schedule a virtual presentation for your town, and invite the relevant folks to be in the room. So that if you need FinCom approval, make sure that there's someone from FinCom who's in that presentation so they can ask questions and see how the administrative fee works and, you know, what the cost benefit analysis is for the administrative fee, because there is an administrative fee. But the advantage is you don't have to hire another person in the town and pay benefits to that person and have them on staff full time. So once you guys do that, then I think you're going to be ready to talk with each other as multiple towns about how, if you want to move forward, how you move forward an all island program or a shared administrative services program. But the will within each town to actually expend on this program needs to be established first. Peter, you have a question?
Just a comment. Although Placemate has been working entirely with resort towns, they've had great success in a variety of cultures in those various towns. They've been very different towns, and they have a really impressive track record. And when you look at the details of their thing in Nantucket or in Provincetown and so forth, it's possible to see that obviously not everything applies to each of the 6 towns on this island. But there's a lot in there that to work with. The second thing is that we now in Chilmark, since we're embarked on this as a pilot program, and we're beginning to have, I think we do, and a timetable for the next 18 months to work this out. And I think it's incumbent on us to share with the other towns about any punctuation marks that come along in our experience, where we are on all of these other issues, including the funding apparatus and so forth, and to be able to share sort of each step along the way. I think that'll help, and it'll help us continue our conversation as this plays out.
That sounds great. Thanks for committing to do that, Peter. That's going to help everybody. Any more questions about Lease to Locals? And I dropped the link in the chat. This will take you direct to the Provincetown page. But from that page, you can click around and see the Nantucket program. You can see all the Western Ski Town programs. I don't think the Orleans and Wellfleet, or sorry, the Eastham Wellfleet pilot is up yet, but you can reach out to them and ask for the parameters of the Eastham and Wellfleet pilot if you want. Anybody else? Okay. Moving right along to the next topic, which is everyone's favorite project, the housing production plans. So what I'd love to do is just go around the room, and I'm going to call on the point people for the housing production plans. And if you could just give us a little bit of a report out of where you feel like you are in the process, as far as like, I know everyone's moving towards meeting number 3, and Oak Bluffs has already had their meeting number 3. Mark, actually, are you someplace where you can talk? I see Mark Leonard just came on. He's select board for the town of Oak Bluffs.
I can talk, but Katie could talk also.
Katie could talk too. That's true. But I'm going to leave it to the two of you to decide, because I'd like to call on Oak Bluffs first, since you guys just had meeting number 3. And the other towns are about to have their 3rd meetings. Aquinnah's is this week and everyone else's is next week.
I'll go. Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Katie.
So we finished meeting number 3. In all fairness, we kind of had a head start, I think, because we were just updating a plan. So, but right now it's at the Barrett Plans putting together their draft, and we hope to review it and then hope to present to the planning and select boards beginning next month is the goal.
Great. Are you guys feeling pretty comfortable with where the draft is?
I think so. I think our last meeting, a lot of points that were mentioned were incorporated in what we hope to be the draft. We haven't seen the draft yet. So I do need to reach out to Barrett Planning to see where they are with that. And then hopefully we reserve the right to add a few more comments if we're missing anything from those meetings before it gets presented.
Fantastic. Okay. So like Katie mentioned, to be fair, Oak Bluffs, this is the second time they're doing this. They adopted their housing production plan the last time around. This gets easier as you go. So for the towns who didn't adopt a housing production plan the last time around, it probably feels like more of a lift right now, and it actually is. So this is going to be the toughest one in 5 years from now. You know, God willing, you adopt your housing production plans in a way that satisfies you. And then in 5 years, it'll be an easier process when you have to update it. So we don't have anybody on from Aquina, I don't think, who's the next town to go. And then Monday is Edgartown. So I'm going to ask Jeanette and Julia to unmute and talk a little bit about where you are with your process in Edgartown. And if you have any questions you want to ask of the other towns, like relative to whatever you're thinking about, and this is for any town, then please go ahead. This is the right forum to be asking those questions.
Well, I'll go first. I'm worried about Monday's meeting, frankly, because all of a sudden the Barrett planning people are telling us that we should already have identified specific parcels and specific areas of town where we're going to do specific things. And that's not something that was discussed in the first two meetings. So I don't know how we're going to, how do we identify particular areas of town or particular parcels other than in a public meeting? We don't have any mechanism for doing that, you know. They sent us an email saying, please, you know, identify, and it's like, no one can answer that question in an email. It's so I don't think we're anywhere near, you know. She says, this is Judy. She says the third meeting is supposed to preview the proposed goals and strategies, and we can't really address the strategy types listed above without input and direction from the town. I'm like, okay, so why didn't they lead us to have those discussions in the two previous meetings? I'm kind of bewildered.
So that's great feedback. And I think my understanding is they're going to put a placeholder in that section. And then on Monday.
It's five things, Laura. It's five.
It's all of them?
Yes.
Okay. So it's likely that Edgartown's going to need an extra meeting. I think what happened in a lot of the other towns was that when that initial, here's what you need to do, comes out, because some of the towns had already adopted housing production plans in the past, they took that preview and they brought it into their town boards. I know that West Tisbury, the planning board and affordable housing committee, have been meeting and going over like priority zoning changes and things like that. And the affordable housing committee's been, I think on Tuesday, they had a full list of town parcels that they were assessing and going through to earmark. So it sounds like Edgartown is going to need some more help and some more time. So we'll cross that bridge with Barrett Planning Group. And I've already reached out to your town administrator just to say, hey, you know, I'm CC'd on these emails. I know what's going on. We'll have a conversation with Barrett Planning, and then we'll figure out what kind of extra support we need to get the town of Edgartown so you guys can keep going forward.
I mean, a typical planning board meeting, we have 2, sometimes 3 a month. They go from 5:30 to 7:30 or 7:45, maybe 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there aren't 5 minutes to discuss this stuff, honestly. And there are very contentious issues every time we have a meeting. So
well, we'll work it out, Julia. That's really great feedback. And I think it sounds like you guys need more of like an extra facilitated meeting to try to narrow down these pieces. You can do, just to be clear, that the information that Barrett needs for the HPPs, you're not chained to those decisions. So it's, what's your intent? Like these are the properties that the town has identified that are available that you'll be investigating or doing a feasibility study on, or have the intent to put out for an RFP. It doesn't lock you into just those properties. There's an understanding there's a public process involved. There's town meeting votes for zoning changes. There's town meeting votes and board votes for RFPs. Those things can change. So there's some wiggle room after the HPPs come out. And also once there's a draft HPP, as Oak Bluffs mentioned, it has to go through the planning board and select board process of open public meeting for conversation and discussion before a vote. And that does not necessarily just mean one meeting. maybe multiple meetings within your boards, you know, to come to a final consensus. John, did you have a question or a comment? John Abrams? Whoops, I think John just froze.
John's frozen.
John is frozen. We'll come back to him.
Oh,
Oh, you're unfrozen. Okay, John,
yeah.
you are unfrozen.
I just wanted to add to that, like Julia, your concern, if you identify town parcels, if you identify parcels, it doesn't mean you're going to do anything on those parcels. There's nobody that can say that it's all going to work out. It's just some possibilities to explore. So I mean, I think you can make it simpler than people are. I've heard people worrying about that, and maybe it's less complicated than it seems.
I don't know how we would come up with even one location where we would want a comprehensive permit project.
Well, then maybe you can't.
Okay, well, we'll follow up on that offline, but Julia, thanks for sharing that. Is there anyone who wants to share how you got to, like, can Oak Bluffs maybe share just a little information about how you arrived at your town parcels? Mark, can you share that?
Yeah. Quickly, I mean, one of the things that the easy ones for us are those substandard lots that you can't, by our zoning, can't build on only for affordable. So that's easy for us to identify those substandard lots. And then we have lots that belong to the trust, the municipal housing trust. So that's basically our town available lots.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
And like you've said, it's not like we're going to develop all of them, but we have a list of lots that have potential.
Thanks. Are there other towns, just out of curiosity, who have positively identified their town-owned lots? I'm like blanking on, it's Oak Bluffs and Tisbury.
Well, there's been a discussion about 3 lots in the Affordable Housing Committee. I fundamentally agree with what Julia's put out, that this was something that has not been, I don't believe, adequately discussed in the towns. I'm not sure that identifying the lots was an understood task from the beginning, although I think it was referenced. I don't know that we understood that it was significant as it is at the end. So what we've ended up, Casey Haywood wrote, I think, a very sound response to the questions that Olivia raised for the HPP, and in that identified one potential town lot that has been discussed in the Affordable Housing Group. It's been referenced, I know, in the trust meeting, and my guess is it's been probably discussed a little bit. I don't know, Ben, if it's been discussed in the planning board or not. It's on across from the school lot. So we've identified one, but I think there's, you know, I hear what John is saying. You can throw any number of them in. It doesn't mean, but at the same time, I mean, this is going to be a document that's identified in public and all of that. And I think it has to include something that has some reasonable town support. And this process, in some ways, didn't fully, I mean, and this isn't being, I'm not being critical of either the commission or Barrett, but there really wasn't the staffing to dig into the town capacity to identify these kinds of things, have the discussion, and move on from that. Anyway.
That's actually great. That's great feedback, Victor. And I think because of that issue, and same thing at Edgartown and some of the other towns, we're gonna see that highlighted in some of the recommendations about increasing capacity within the town, so that there's some kind of, there's either external planning capacity for these issues or
Yeah.
internal planning capacity to
Yeah.
provide more capacity to identify these things. So Victor, since we're on you, would you share a little bit about like where Tisbury is? You guys, I want to share that Tisbury had an incredibly productive meeting. They had a supplemental HPP meeting because there were tech issues on HPP meeting number 2 and some folks couldn't log on. And it was, I thought, a really, really productive meeting. You want to share where you think you are?
We've had some reasonably consistent themes. One is we have a housing stock that's old, dense, and yeah, like everybody, has a higher percentage of seasonal than resident occupied. And so the one theme is how do we begin to convert some of that existing housing stock for affordable housing, either rental and or ownership. A second theme has been to think about zoning density. I don't know any of the details on that. That's the extent to which that's been done and discussed in the planning board or not, but it's been a theme of the meetings. A third theme has been how to create incentives for developing some of this conversion of existing housing stock, and that has raised the question about the application of tax exempt or the tax exemption or resident tax exemption to non-resident owners that use properties on a year-round occupancy basis for residents.
And that's based on, just to interject there, that's based on what Provincetown is doing. So if you're not a year-round resident, you own a property, you're renting to a year-round resident, then in Provincetown you qualify for the residential tax exemption, which is a really nice incentive and benefit for non-resident owners who are renting to year-rounders.
In one of the meetings, if not twice, two different occasions, I'm glad Michael is here. The issue of homelessness has been raised in the discussion. There has not been a strategy or solution identified with it, although I'd say as a footnote to this group, if you read the article in the Gazette yesterday about the governor visiting the hospital housing site in Navigator Homes, the president of the hospital, Denise Shapici, referenced in the article, it was quoted in the article as saying that site would be great for permanent shelter, as well as the staff residents and long-term care residents that are there. I totally agree. I try to write a comment to say yes, yay. So the issue of homelessness, I think, should not be ignored in this housing production plan. It's the quintessential affordable issue. I would say, well, Tisbury did have a second meeting because of the technical issues and attendance. Overall, I mean, attendance, to be honest, hasn't been overwhelming at these meetings. We've had 10, 12 people, something in that number. And it's, involved some expected faces. It's been really challenging, again, to make this community-wide interest. And the final thing I'm going to say is what surfaced in the last two community meetings was, a target for Tisbury, Need Haven, of having 12 units in a year produced, and in order to be qualified as a qualified plan by the state. And that is, I think we have found to be, given what's in the pipeline, given where the town is overall, and all these conditions, I have no idea that we could generate 12 new affordable units in a year. I mean, at least the locals or some, that concept applied to Dukes County housing might be able to do it. But my guess is that the plan of something even like that, a variation, it's going to be more than a year or at least a year. So
Thanks, Victor. I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to move on to the next town, but thanks for sharing all that in detail. And I'm sure that resonated with a lot of the other towns. I see Mike's hand up at Harbor Homes. Did you want to jump in, Mike?
If there's a moment, I wanted to say thank you to Victor and actually towns, because having attended most of the second round HPPs and now we'll have a representative all at the third one, the towns have been resoundingly supportive of the needs of the unhoused. We tend to focus on the income levels above, what's affordable, but, we also recognize that we have many in our community that make 60% of what's affordable or make 0% of what's affordable. And so thank you for that. To Victor's point as well, we are looking at working with the town and with IHT on that property that's now become available. The governor was referencing for an RFP, and the best approach seems to be one where there's mixed use, but we can get into that later. The last thing I want to use this platform for is, so I've been interim for about a month now, and the thing that's probably shocked me the most about this time of year is the number of people that find themselves temporarily unhoused because they've been put out of the job they came here to be employed to do, and either that job was promised to include housing, or the housing that was included was not a place anyone on this call would ever consider living in, and they show up at the door here in New York Avenue. And so we tend to think of the unhoused as being somewhat responsible for their plight, and or because they've chosen that lifestyle. We just completed a survey where no one surveyed has said that they choose to be unhoused, and most have said they are looking for work or they had work. I'm not going to name any specific businesses, but this week alone, we heard about one person that was put out of their job at a restaurant, one person that was put out of their job at a convenience store, one person that was put out of their job at a named supermarket. And so, so just for this conversation and for later discussion, we do need to figure out how we get the businesses in our community, especially during this busy time, to take more responsibility for their employees, so that it's not solely the burden of Harbor Homes or the towns to find housing when they've been irresponsible in how they've managed their staff. So I'll get off my soapbox now and let you carry on. But hopefully that's something that resonates with all of you on the call today. Thank you.
It's a good point. It's a really good point. Mike and I had actually talked about this on Monday, that this is through no fault of their own. These are employers who overstaffed and then cut someone who arrived here on the island, and they lost their housing at the same time that they lost their job. And that's not a tenable situation. That's not something that should be acceptable in our businesses. So I just want everybody, I want to put a punctuation mark on that so that everyone's aware of that. We're going to move. Is there any questions for Mike about that? The other, just before we move on, I do want to just highlight, Mike had a statistic he shared with me on Monday that I was shocked by. Was it how many of the folks that you've served in the last year, the percentage of the folks who are actually employed by one of the municipalities was incredibly high? Did you say it was 20%?
2024, 20% of the people that we've served either at a winter shelter or currently are being served in our congregate homes have some sort of municipal or town job. It could be a part-time job. It could be the tree department. It could be any number of those things. And so they're known. And so that's why it's great, that the town of OB is considering collaborating with us on municipal housing, because we think that's a way to address that particular population. So it's a big number. It's a dozen people probably a year that we see in that situation that find themselves either suddenly or temporarily unhoused. Many of them are couch surfing, so they had housing during the off season, but of course their job with the town is year round, and all of a sudden summer they have no place to live. So
great. Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate that. So when we get through when we move into the housing production plans and the goals and strategies, I think we're going to expect to see something around regional collaboration, around addressing the needs of homeless residents, including, I'm hoping, municipal employees across the 6 towns who find themselves suddenly unhoused. Because I think under the seasonal communities designation, we now have some actual tools that we can use to address that. And we'll be getting the guidance for that out in September. So thanks, Mike. I'm going to move on to the next town. Chilmark, do you guys want to give us a brief rundown? And I know you don't actually have town land, so I did talk with Judy Barrett about that. And there are options for towns that do not have identifiable town land for development. Anne, do you want to give a quick report?
Yeah, and Peter, you can help me on this one. We do have a town parcel up at Peaked Hill.
Oh, I meant beyond that, since that's already, you have an RFI out on that
That's our
already.
main, our main focus.
Yeah.
I think I would echo what Victor and Julia talked about in the capacity issue. We've not been able to carry the momentum. Between the different meetings. So we started with 24 at the first meeting. I think we had 11 or 12 at the second meeting. And our third meeting is, I guess, next week. So it's been hard to have the excitement, and it's such a busy time for boards that we talked about. I think Chilmark, we're struggling a bit. They certainly have Barrett Planning have nailed all the issues on zoning analysis and all that. That will be very helpful getting it into, and we did not approve our last HPP. So it's as though we're starting from scratch a bit. Peter, help me out.
I would just have to underline that a good part of Chilmart's effort along these lines is still what I would call aspirational.
Yes.
And it has to do, I'm sure every town has its, the acronym is the LOA. It's the level of sort of ambivalence about the whole issue. And so we've spent a lot of our time trying to figure out, with the history of what Chilmark has done in the past towards these towards the same issues, some of the issues with youth lots and this and that and some community housing projects, to see how we could in the future make some of those initiatives, tailor them or whatever, so that they would somehow qualify for what the strict interpretation of the HPP, the requirements seem to ask for. So in a way, we're sort of going through seeing how as our Peaked Hill thing progresses and this and that, to see how we can use what we're getting out of these HPP meetings that will help us find some sort of resolution down the line that will actually lead to action. Whether we can actually fulfill the minimum requirements or not, I don't think we can answer at the moment. Does that make sense, Anne?
Yeah, so I think that brings up a really good point about reassessing existing inventory as a really viable tool for some of the towns. When units turn over, and I know that Edgartown has some of these units and West Tisbury has some of these units, that when deed restricted units, well, first of all, for Chilmark, if you have a unit that's not deed restricted at 80, but when it turns over, it can be deed restricted to 80 and then offered out via an affirmative fair housing marketing plan, there's a unit that's already on the ground that just became a subsidized housing inventory unit and can count. So I think it's great that Chilmark's looking at that. And for the towns that have 80% inventory and below, that isn't displaying on the SHI generally because it wasn't offered out via an affirmative fair housing marketing plan, which is the case for some of the Edgartown units and the West Tisbury units. Looking at those and tracking them for when they turn over and working with Dukes County Regional Housing Authority to make sure those are offered via an affirmative fair housing marketing plan gives you an opportunity to actually capture those existing 80% units onto the subsidized housing inventory. So that's coming out as a theme across like multiple towns. Thank you to Chilmark, and let's go on to West Tisbury. That's Wanda.
Yes, hi.
Yep.
We were in that same state. I think, as you explained, we have a lot of half of what we have, the 23 that we have. We have 42 homes, but half of them are not, don't qualify for the 80 because of the age time.
Well, they qualify, income qualify, but they were not offered out via an affirmative fair housing marketing plan. And this has been West Tisbury's big quandary. This is the town that I live in, is that they thought they had this big inventory. And then when they got a look at their SHI a couple of years ago, they were mystified as to why it was so small. And it's because of that affirmative fair housing marketing piece. So go on, continue, Wanda. Thank you.
Right, and now we're going to stay on top of all of that, and as you said, monitor. We just sent out an annual recertification letter to all of our residents. So with that being annual, we'll tweak it as we go along to ask questions like if you're interested, if you're planning to sell or rent or something like that. Please let us know so that we can follow them for converting them to the 80% with SHI when that time comes. If we stay annual, we should be able to catch them and be able to add them to SHI. We're going to, we're having our third meeting on the 17th. We just sent Barrett Planning the vacant lots. I worked with Max Anderson, who is in the assessors. He and I put a broad piece together for title purposes, square footage, so acreage, as much as we could leave in there for those who needed whatever the piece is that could help us get developable land. We know there's like that much, but through title searches, perhaps we can free a title. So that could be promising for us. And we're going to look into that first.
That's great. Thanks, Wanda. And on that note, so the MVC, Dan Doyle, my colleague, and I have been in the process of applying for a mass housing grant that would provide technical support to the MVC and all 6 towns to assess all the town-owned parcels, no matter how small they are, across all 6 towns. And there's over 450 of those parcels. Wanda referenced some of the smaller ones in West Tisbury that some of them need title clearing. Some of them would need to be joined with other undersized lots. I know Edgartown, I spoke with the town administrator, and there are a lot of lots like this in Edgartown that need their titles cleared. Under this grant proposal, we're asking for support, not just technical support on assessing the lots for what they would need to be unlocked for housing, but also can we get support from the state on clearing title on these parcels, because that's a significant barrier for all the towns. And it looks like we are going to get this grant and tech support. I spoke with Kat Miller at Mass Housing last week. I have to submit the letters that the towns provided in support. The only 2 towns I haven't spoken to yet about getting letters of support are Chilmark, because you don't really have town-owned land that's, even that could be unlocked. And Aquina, which is kind of in a similar situation, most of their town-owned land is actually in conservation. So no, you will still be included in this study. I just talked to Mass Housing and they said the 4 towns that really have the larger inventory, the letters are sufficient from them. And if for some reason I need support letters from Chilmark and Aquina, I'll ask you guys for it. But you're mapped in our big GIS map, so your towns will be included in this. So if there's any potential, including redevelopment of previously developed sites that you want included in this, you can certainly let us know, once we get the grant, which fingers crossed, we'll be finding out like fairly soon. You can add that in, because redevelopment of public land is also something that we can be looking at. I've recently been doing some research on the redevelopment of public libraries and library housing, which is a very popular thing in small towns and large cities. And it is, I have to say, some of the super coolest opportunities for housing that I have seen. I mean, who wouldn't want to live over your public library? So that's something that, the island towns may want to consider in the future as we go into, improvements and capital projects involving the libraries. I think that's all the towns. So do we have anything else to talk about? Are there any questions, like general questions or comments about the housing production plans? that hasn't been covered? Yeah, Wanda.
After we do our third meeting, what would be our next step as a region or as a town?
So as a town, if the third meeting, if Barrett Planning has enough info to get you through the third meeting, the way that Oak Bluffs got through the third meeting, where they can give you like a pretty complete goals and strategies section, then you would give them feedback and they would incorporate your comments during that third meeting into a final draft, which they would then provide to the town to review. If you're not ready or there's blank spots, like, you know, if West Tisbury isn't able to identify the town parcels, I think you've got most of your other pieces identified. But if, say, by that third meeting, you don't have your town parcels clearly identified, they would give you a goals and strategies that had everything except that section blank, and then give you some, you know, help during that meeting to kind of narrow down your list, and you'd have a little more time to come up with that and plug that section in. It sounds like West Tisbury's not going to have a problem identifying those parcels. You may just need a little extra time to have the conversations around identifying those. Then it would go, after the final draft, it goes to the planning board and select board and the Affordable Housing Committee. I'm assuming, I expect that all towns will include their Affordable Housing Committee in the conversations. Then the plan has to go through review with the select board and the planning board, which can be either in separate meetings or joint meetings if the town chooses, to review, comment on, suggest changes, make changes if they so choose, and then ultimately, hopefully, adopt the plan. Sometimes that's pretty quick. I think in the case of Oak Bluffs, because they've done this before, their plan is pretty close to what they expected. It may take a little longer in some of the towns that are adopting or voting to adopt for the first time, so that you may need a little extra time to get your plans into shape the way that you want them. And like Julia said, if you need additional technical assistance, we can certainly talk about that with Barrett Planning Group, and, you know, and the town, and see what we need to do to provide that additional support in order to get the process moved forward. Victor, you have a question?
Yeah, you partly answered it, I think, but my question was whether Barrett, as a matter of the existing contract, would be present at the public hearing process for the planning boards and select boards discussion.
They would not. That's not part of the contract. So if you want that, then the town would need to contract separately with Barrett Planning to have them curate that conversation. I can be there if I know in advance and I can schedule it, but that was not part of the contract to shepherd it through the local process.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. And just so you're aware too, town housing trust funds can pay for any work on the housing production plans. So if, Victor, I know Tisbury has funds in the housing trust. If that is what you would like to do, then you are allowed to use those funds to, you know, contract with Barrett Planning for some additional work to shepherd the plan through.
I mean, I think that's for the planning board and select board test, but I mean, I'm happy to be part of that
It is,
conversation
but I guess what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
a valid use
Right.
of housing, of
Yes, right.
housing trust
Yep.
funds
Yep.
for all the towns.
Yeah.
Anybody else on the housing production plans? Okay, so I'm gonna zip through the legislative update just quickly, and just raise your hand if you have a question. Otherwise, in the interest of time, I know it's a beautiful day outside. I want to let everybody out as close to 5 o'clock as possible. But we have some pretty important legislative updates. There was a preliminary housing committee hearing that I was asked to testify at. It was invitation only, and there was a panel requested by the housing committee, which is now co-chaired by Senator Sear. For myself, the Affordable Housing Trust chair, who's also the chair of the Nantucket Association of Real Estate Brokers, and the executive director of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. So we testified all together on the supports that were identified by our towns through legislation and through filings. So that means the housing bank bill that was refiled for the 6 towns, the transfer fee, and the necessary components of the seasonal communities designation that we need refined into law, and also some concerns that the towns had, which I outlined in information I sent out to everybody around helping smaller towns get more units on the subsidized housing inventory, providing some technical support and providing some more assistance. So the regular bill hearings are going to be starting, I believe, in July. So I'm going to be circling back to everybody with template letters, just like we did last session, and ask the boards to prepare in advance to be ready to provide testimony when it's requested, because as you probably remember from the last session or the last two sessions, the legislature does not give us much of a heads up when they call a hearing. And getting the testimony in, it's pretty quick turnaround. So if the boards can vote in advance, yes, we're going to direct our administrator or whomever to provide the testimony when it's necessary. I'll have a template for you. You can pre-vote, and then I can just send an email out and saying, hey, this bill hearing's been scheduled. Can you please send the testimony in? Here's the addresses. So that's just a heads up, and I'll be coming to everyone more specifically with information about that within the next couple weeks. The second piece is that Secretary Augustus will be here on the Vineyard on July 17th for the TAC National groundbreaking. He has some extra time in his schedule, and I'm just giving you a heads up. I've requested a repeat of the meeting we had June 6th last year with all of the town governmental bodies, the housing groups, the tribe, and I'm hoping that I get a yes. If not, we will try to do something smaller, but equally as representative, so that there can be some interaction around the seasonal communities designation from town governmental officials. Anyone who can attend the Tackanash groundbreaking, I would encourage you to come to support this, this project and make a strong showing for the secretary. Shanette, you have a question?
Yes. Can you just repeat when he'll be here?
Oh, sure. July 17th.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Laura, what is the project you're talking about? I've never heard of it before.
Oh, it was called the Southern Tier, and now it's
okay.
National. Sorry, it is now called TAC National.
Okay.
The project previously known as Southern Tier. And then, okay, seasonal communities. The Secretary's office has also committed to having 3 virtual informational listening sessions on seasonal communities for residents and governmental officials sometime in June and July. They're a little delayed scheduling it, but I did hear back from them today. They're expecting to have the schedule out by either later this week or early next week. As soon as I get it, I'll send it out to the Jahg and all of the towns. Those will be virtual listening sessions. I believe they're going to try to do it after 5 o'clock so that more community members can attend. And anyone can attend to any one of those 3 sessions or multiples of those 3 sessions. It'll be open to anybody in any seasonal community. So that'll give a chance for some direct Q&A from not just board members, but also community residents. And then finally, in September, that's the next Seasonal Communities Advisory Council meeting. That's going to be held on Nantucket. And as I put in the topics list that was on the website, we don't have a firm date yet, but I've got a commitment from the Secretary's office to schedule the time of the meeting so that it intersects with the schedule for the Inter-Island Ferry, so that anybody who wants to come over from Martha's Vineyard for the day will be able to come over in the morning, make the meeting, and be able to get on the boat and come back. So as soon as I have that date and time and location, which should be Town Hall, which is walking distance from the ferry, then I will let everybody know and encourage anybody who wants to attend to attend. If you can't attend, there will be a hybrid component. So I'd encourage you to, log on. The last meeting in Provincetown was incredibly informative, and we have the attention of the governor's office. The lieutenant governor was at that meeting, and the attorney general's office. I'm very happy to let you know that they are now going to, it looks like, be embedded in the guidance process. So we're hoping for a really robust process, just like with the ADUs by right, with direct input from the attorney general on the public sector employee housing piece and the year-end deed restrictions, which are 2 of the trickiest parts of that guidance. And that's it. It's 5:02. Does anyone have anything else? And yeah, Wanda?
Well, you put all that in writing.
It's actually all in there. It's all, if you go to the topics list on the MVC calendar, all that
Oh.
information about the legislative update is all in there. You can just cut and paste it and stick it right into your notes and your minutes. And Jeanette, it's got the the July 17th date on there and all the other information too. If you have any trouble finding it, just contact me, but it's right on the Jahg calendar event. So I want to thank everybody for all your hard work on the HPPs and everything else. And I have to say, I know this feels like a big lift, but from where I'm standing, I'm seeing so many changes happening in a positive direction and things lining up in a way that I have not, that I did not see when I first started this job 2.5 years ago. And I'm really, really encouraged and really inspired by what I'm seeing. And I have very high hopes for where we are headed. So I think this has been a really instructive process through the HPPs, and I'm seeing a lot of benefits come out of it. So with that,
we can blame a lot of that on you, Laura.
yeah, I will take responsibility
Yeah.
for that. So, oh, sorry. No, I didn't want to give myself credit. The painful part, yeah, you can blame that on me. I definitely like, but anyway, I'm really happy to help, and it's a privilege to be serving the community. So I'm going to wish you guys a good summer. We're not going to have, we had a JAG meeting last July and no one showed up. So we're not going to do that this year. So we'll have the next JAG meeting in September. If anyone needs anything from me in the meantime, or you have topics you want to talk about with the other groups, let me know and I will do my best to try to convene a conversation. But again, I'm really going to stress that least to locals piece. Start having that conversation within your towns. Click on that link, do the research, start having the conversations within your towns. And please, if your FinCom is going to need to approve it, involve your FinCom. They will be interested in this program and they will like to know about it. Yeah.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you guys. Have a great night.